right, welcome to the show. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. After promising not to for years, Joe Biden pardoned his son Hunter in the waning weeks of his lame duck presidency. But it wasn't just a pardon, it was a very broad blanket pardon spanning crimes and potential crimes dating back 11 years. But now we are hearing that Biden may not be done with his blanket pardons. Reports suggest Biden might hand out a number of pardons, perhaps most controversially to Anthony Fauci. Also, we're going to be talking about Trump's latest cabinet picks and a new Heartland report analyzing how socialist candidates fared in the 2024 election. We are talking about all this and more on episode 475 of the In the Tank podcast.
How do you like my garbage truck? This truck is in honor of Kamala and Joe Biden.
Oh, sorry, I can't get enough of that one. Welcome to the In the Tank podcast. As always, I am your host, Donald Kendal. Joining me today, I've got VP of the Heartland Institute, Jim Lakely. How are you doing today, good sir? Oh my gosh, we are off to a good
I
start.
pulled it off right in the beginning. I muted myself. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But I saw today that they finally finished counting all the ballots in the California election. And wouldn't you know it, isn't this weird? Every single time the counting takes weeks and weeks and weeks on end, it always ends up being good for the Democrats. I just don't understand. I don't really believe in coincidences, but boy, that's weird, isn't it? It's weird, isn't it? We need to fix that.
Yeah, there's big coincidences and there's little coincidences. So that one, that might be in the one of the big column. Also
Donnie,
joining us, we have Chris Talgo, editorial director.
I'm going to have to take umbrage. I have to take umbrage with your assessment of the spectrum of coincidences, because Seinfeld actually devoted an entire episode to this, if you remember correctly.
Oh, I remember.
When it was the Eastern European woman writing the dissertation that Elaine had to edit when she was working at Pendant Publishing. And her boyfriend had gone to clean Jerry's apartment.
Oh, we don't need a whole history of this.
Okay, but I'm just saying that episode actually had a very good back and forth about whether you can have a big or small coincidence, or whether they're just coincidences.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, Rana was her name. Rana made the argument that you cannot have big or little coincidences. There are just coincidences.
Yeah.
Elaine took the other side of that argument and said, no, you can have big or small. I think I'm going to have to go with Rana on this. You cannot. They're only coincidences. They're not big or not small.
That's an absolute insane statement to make.
Well,
it's a coincidence if we just happen to be wearing the same color. It's also a coincidence if some Mega Millions jackpot winner happens to also. Forget it. We're getting way off course here.
It usually takes us a little longer to go off the rails, but let's get it back on track.
Right. On your bingo card, the middle circle is Jim muting himself.
That's right.
Going off the rails is also on the bingo card. Anyways, we've got a lot to talk about. Merry Christmas season, everybody. It is post Thanksgiving, so I've got my tree up right over here. We're definitely in the Christmas season now, so if you don't like that, deal with it.
So you don't have a Festivus poll? What's wrong with you?
I do have a Festivus celebration coming up, but
right,
let's not get sidetracked into Seinfeld stuff more. We have a lot to talk about, but before we get into it, I have to put out that message that I put at the beginning of all of these episodes. That is a call to action for you all. If you are listening to this podcast, probably on a Friday or later, first off, write a review for us on iTunes. That would be greatly appreciated. And consider joining us a day earlier at Thursdays at noon Central Time, where we are live streaming on Facebook and YouTube and Rumble and X. You could join in the conversation, throw your comments and questions in the chat. Maybe we'll show your comment on screen. Maybe we'll address your questions on the fly. And you could also support the show not by using super chats, because YouTube has demonetized us because we say things that make people mad, I guess. I don't know. But you can support the show by going to heartland.org/inthetank. That way YouTube doesn't take a 30% cut. Or you could just hit that like button, share this content, subscribe if you haven't already, or leave a comment under the video. All those things help break through the big tech algorithms and prevent content like this from being shown to more people. Anyways, let's get to it. We've got a bunch of topics, as you can see on our sidebar there. And I want to get to the first one right away. So I originally only intended this first story to be more or less our opening chit chat. Joe Biden pardoning his son, Hunter Biden. The news broke on this over the long Thanksgiving holiday weekend. So by 2024 standards, this story is ancient. But I did want to talk about it at least a little bit, because I think that there is some nuance that is intentionally being skated over by most in the leftist media. So many talking heads and commentators are just trying to gloss over this by saying, well, Trump did pardons too. Every president does pardons. I didn't hear you complaining when Trump pardoned General Flynn, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this intentionally ignores some major things that I just wanted to kind of address on this podcast. The easy one off the top is Joe Biden's constant promising that he was not going to pardon Hunter Biden, a line that was repeated by other Democrats and probably most by Press Secretary KJP. I don't remember Trump promising that he wasn't going to pardon anybody and then, went back on his word and then did so. I don't remember that. Maybe it did. I don't think it did. But the craziest aspect of this pardon was the range and blanket quality of the pardon. So this pardon stretches back 11 years and provides immunity to Hunter Biden on any crimes and any potential crimes that Hunter may have committed during this period of time. Jim, do I have those details correct?
Unfortunately, you do have those details correct.
And that's unprecedented, right? I mean, this isn't something that normally happens. Am I correct?
No, this is something that has never happened before. And our corrupt media, of course, was carrying water for Joe Biden, promising that no, I'll never pardon Hunter Biden. I will not even commute his sentence. And they just expressed shock that he would go back on his word as a Biden. To actually go back to Seinfeld one more time, it was George Costanza who said, "It's not a lie if you believe it." But this was actually a legit lie, because it was reported by NBC News of all places that right after Hunter Biden was forced to, but his deal, he pled guilty to felony charges with firearms and with evading taxes. That was back in June. And immediately back in June, Joe Biden and his aides were discussing whether or not he was going to pardon Hunter Biden. And of course, the answer to that was, of course he is going to pardon his son. And the only question was whether or not he was going to say so publicly, or what he was going to say publicly. And they had come to the agreement that he will just deny that he's going to do that all the way until he has to do it. Now, normally these sorts of pardons happen, at the end of a presidency, and they're very controversial, but it dies down because everyone's focused on the new guy taking over the presidency. But Joe Biden was forced to do this over Thanksgiving weekend because I think right now, or maybe at this time, but this week was the sentencing for Hunter Biden. And for all those lefties out there who call Donald Trump a convicted felon, you are not technically, or actually at all, a convicted felon until sentencing. So Hunter Biden now, because he was pardoned before his sentencing for the felonies that he admitted to committing, will now never be a convicted felon. So good, good for him. I guess now he can own firearms again, and he can also vote. He'll also be voting when he's dead, because that's the way it works with the Democratic Party.
Sweet. But he can leave those firearms in garbage cans near schools too.
That's right. Well, big deal. And it's when I saw this, I heard about it on Sunday. I was busy, and actually my mother texted me and said, I saw it on the text, when I was done doing what I was doing on Sunday evening. She says, Joe just pardoned Hunter. I'm like, holy moly. Okay. And it wasn't until I got home and started reading the stuff that I realized how outrageous this was. And because we all expected it, right? But then when you see that it's a blanket pardon for any and all federal crimes that could possibly be imagined, starting in January of 2014, the very month that he started working for Burisma, the energy company for which he had no qualifications to be on the board of directors, for which he was paid $1 million a year, and which was the most corrupt company in the most corrupt country in all of Europe, in Ukraine. Now, why would you pardon somebody for any crimes they may or may not have committed if you are not pretty certain that he had committed federal crimes? And but your administration has done a great job of making sure that he's not held accountable for that, and there isn't a real investigation of it. But then a new administration led by Donald Trump and then Kash Patel, which we're going to get to here in a minute, as the head of the FBI, is going to pursue criminal charges, is going to get down to the bottom of the influence peddling that is the Biden family business. I would like somebody somewhere to explain to me what it is that the Bidens do for money. None of them have any marketable skills. They seem to travel all around the world, have meetings, and then money comes flowing into their 21 different shell companies to hide where it's coming from, and then where it goes, and then it goes to all sorts of different Biden family members, and then of course at least 10% for the big guy. All of this stuff has been covered up. Biden's supposedly independent Department of Justice has not pursued any of these obvious, like smoking gun crimes that have been going on influence peddling. There is nothing else that Hunter Biden is qualified to do but to be the bagman for a shakedown operation for the influence that Joe Biden can have on foreign policy as vice president of the United States. He pardoned his son for before he was president. 2014, he was vice president of the United States and in charge of the Ukrainian desk at the White House. And what happened, and everybody knows this because he bragged, because Joe Biden is so stupid, he bragged about it on camera that he told Ukraine, "You fire that prosecutor who's coming after Burisma, which my son sits on and which we use as a perhaps a money laundering operation. You stop that investigation or you're not getting any aid." And he says, and the famous quote, "Son of a bitch, they fired the guy." So that's what Joe Biden has been in the business of for his entire life. He was first elected to the Senate at the age of 29 and has been a senator or vice president for all but 4 years for his entire adult life. He doesn't have any skills either, except as being a bullshit artist and figuring out schemes in which he can enrich himself on a public servant salary. He still has multiple homes and millions of dollars in his accounts. How does that happen for somebody who's just a senator or a vice president who is operating in the public interest and everything is on the up and up? I want Chris to get in here. I got a lot more to say about this that makes me angry. But when you because I want to get into some of the stuff on that Hunter laptop. But one of the things about pardoning you from 2014 to I guess Monday or Sunday, one of the things that covers is everything that was on that Hunter Biden laptop. There are a lot of crimes that were seen in plain view on that Hunter Biden laptop, which again, the corrupt deep state falsely called Russian disinformation. So we'll get into some of those crimes, I guess. But this is outrageous. This has never happened before in American history. And the only upshot of this is that it gives Donald Trump complete carte blanche to do whatever kind of pardon stuff he wants, basically about 30 seconds after he takes the oath of office.
Yeah, I based on something that you were saying there, I'm starting to develop a little bit of a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory in my head. But give me a minute to kind of sort it all out. And during that minute, I want Chris's reactions on this particular story.
Well, I think one of the things that Jim didn't mention, and I agree with everything that he did mention, is that well, I mean, where do I even begin? There are so many problems with what Biden has done here. The breadth of the pardon, like Jim said, the fact that it goes back, more than a decade and covers basically any federal crime that he could be tied to, is just breathtaking when you think about it. But I'm also just a little bit disappointed in the fact that Biden did this obviously on a holiday weekend, and then what does he do the next day? He flies to Angola and doesn't talk to the press for 3 straight days. Basically makes a fool of himself. I don't know if we have any videos of that, but he fell asleep, during the press conference. I mean, just total, like amateur hour. So yeah, I mean that's pretty bad stuff. Everyone knows the Bidens are corrupt. everyone knows that Hunter Biden was the bag man for the big guy, like, Jim explained, and that he was flying around on Air Force Two while Biden was vice president, and making money hand over fist, whether it's from China, whether it's from Ukraine, whether it's from Russia or other countries around the world. We'll never get to the bottom of that. That's just the way that it's going to be. But one of the things that does stand out is that Joe Biden, in his statement regarding the pardon, claimed that the Justice Department is corrupt, and he said that this was all political. So that means that Joe Biden's Justice Department under his watch has been corrupt. And then that leads you to say, well, if it's corrupt, then they went after Donald Trump for political reasons. If they went after Trump for political reasons, then Joe Biden should pardon Donald Trump. Of course, he won't do this. But really, I think what happened here is that Joe Biden has opened up a can of worms, because now Donald Trump can come in and say, President Biden himself said that the FBI and the DOJ is, totally out of control and we need to reform it. So thank you, Joe Biden, for doing that. I don't think he intended to do that, but that's, one of the good things that happened here. Another one that I've been reading about is the Fifth Amendment. So now that Hunter Biden has been pardoned of any crimes that he committed from 2014 to 2025, he can no longer use the Fifth Amendment because he's not in danger of prosecution. So some people have speculated that actually now this could backfire on the Bidens, and they could haul in Hunter Biden into questioning, whether it's before the House or Senate or whomever, and say, okay, now you have to answer these questions. When you were on the Barista board, did you receive basically bribes? He can't hide behind Fifth Amendment anymore. So some people are saying that this actually could blow the whole thing wide open. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know if Donald Trump's even going to want to go down this road when he becomes president, or whether he's just going to move forward, turn the page, and get into his agenda. But yeah, this is just unprecedented, and we all know Hunter Biden's guilty. We all know the laptop was real. It was not Russian disinformation. And, in the court of public opinion, which, does matter, he's guilty.
All right. So here's my tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. Jim, you tell me if I'm too off base. If you tell me I'm off base, then I'll know that I'm way off base. But
all right.
So we've on this podcast, especially in the waning weeks of the election season, and even in the immediate weeks after the election season, we were kind of questioning the left's strategy of painting Donald Trump as this like dictator and this fascist coming in. He's going to use the military to round up his political enemies, all of this sort of stuff. And we thought it was kind of strange because it's like they almost painted themselves into a corner. And it's like, why are you having lunch with the guy that you think is going to be the next Hitler? Like all of that sort of stuff. Maybe the entire strategy of painting him as like the next Hitler, authoritarian or whatever, was to give justification for these sorts of pardons. The cover-up of all the Biden crime family stuff, and as we're going to get into some of the Fauci stuff and these other people, and it's just like, well, we have to make it seem to justify these blanket things. We have to make it seem like this guy has like, bloodthirst, like maybe that was the entire reason that they really overextended themselves with painting him as the next Hitler, was just to give justification for these blanket pardons that we're going to talk about. What do you think?
I'll accept that theory in part because I think, you're hearing them go unhinged that we're going to talk about even more blanket pardons, but because they're so afraid of Kash Patel, who is very qualified to be the new head of the FBI. Earlier this week, the scuttle was that there's no way that the Senate, the Republicans who are going to go turncoat on Trump on his appointments, mark my words, and they're going to, hopefully they would pay a political price for that. They got to get their asses together here and get the American people, the cabinet that they voted for. And part of that is Kash Patel as head of the FBI. And we'll
definitely get to that.
We will get to that, but they are scared. They are scared out of their minds, and their messaging now is that these blanket pardons, and we're going to get into the blanket pardons, just not for Hunter Biden, but for others that is being floated out there, because elsewise, Donald Trump is going to persecute and falsely charge and persecute and try to jail his political enemies. The chutzpah it takes to make that kind of argument right now, when the deep state and our Department of Injustice has done nothing but trump up BS charges against Trump and anyone close to him. And not to mention the January 6th people, what is it, 1,200 people have been charged, and most of them pursued way over what it warranted. People that were, there were rioters, there were people who committed violence, but there were people who just walked into the building with open doors opened by the police, and basically waved in, that have now are convicted felons by an out of control Department of Injustice. And for all of that to have happened over the last 8 years, and for them to now be crying that Trump is going to weaponize the Department of Justice and go after his political enemies. No, it's not. They say it's going to be retribution for what he has gone through. It's not retribution. It's accountability. These people who have broken the law to use the Department of Justice to go after their political enemies and to destroy Donald Trump. Look, we tend to forget the Democrats' re-election strategy was to have Donald Trump in jail. He was never supposed to be president again because he was going to be in prison. And they figured not even every MAGA person would vote for a convicted felon who was sitting in Leavenworth, to be president of the United States. They figured if we could just get him in jail, then he won't be president, and then we will be able to continue the way we have continued, not just for the last 20 years or so, but for many, many decades of the administrative state controlling this country instead of the American people choosing leaders to lead this country. And so, this has been happening for a long time. And the reason that Hunter Biden specifically needed a blanket pardon going back 11 years is because, as Chris pointed out, and we've mentioned earlier, is that Hunter Biden laptop was real. It had tons of information on it. Only Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's, crackhead son is so stupid that he drops a computer off because it's broken at a repair shop, and it is just chock full of evidence of criminal activity, and then he just forgets all about it and walks off. And just forgets that I have all of this incriminating evidence against me and my family for crimes sitting somewhere in a computer shop. Whatever, I'll just grab all my stuff I'll just buy a new MacBook and grab all my stuff from the cloud and move on with my life. Stuff like, there was stuff on that laptop. You might remember there were text messages between him and a family member where he complained. Poor Hunter Biden. He was complaining that he has to go and collect the money and do all the work while dad just sits on his ass. And then, he gets most of the money, try giving up half of your income to dad when he doesn't do anything. I'm doing all the work. Oh, boo-hoo, boo-hoo. Hunter Biden is like the Fredo Corleone of the, from The Godfather of the Biden crime family. He's like, I'm not dumb. I'm smart. And I deserve respect. That's the kind of way he talked and thought in these text messages. He's freaking Fredo, for crying out loud. And there was evidence of him using drugs, of giving drugs to others, of hiring, getting prostitutes into hotel rooms. That is very, very awful. That's human sex workers are not voluntarily doing these sorts of things. That is almost in every case a very awful crime of human trafficking. Those sorts of things now will be investigated. Well, they were going to be until Joe Biden just gave a blanket pardon for any of these activities. It's just absolutely outrageous that this poor guy, there's a smidgen of sympathy for him because he's 54 years old and he's never been able to get his life in order, and he has to keep having daddy bail him out with the biggest bailout of personal responsibility we've ever seen in the United States.
Right. Yeah, there's some, we don't get to every article that I put in the show notes, but there's a good one from National Review where it's like the judge that presided over Hunter Biden's tax case, just kind of ripping into Joe Biden's statements, suggesting that this was selective persecution and all of that. The judge just lays waste to this. So if you're interested in kind of the details of that, go check out the show notes. There's other articles in there too that we just won't have time to get into, but I do want to move on to this idea of potentially more blanket pardons. So what we talked about just now is where I thought the story ended. But I figure we talk about it for a little bit before we launch into some of the other stories that we're going to get into on the show. But late last night, I saw an article that Jim sent me that was related to this story that caused me to restructure the entire podcast. I made a new thumbnail. I went through and changed all of the streams because this article I just thought was fascinating. So this one was from Politico, and it was titled, "Biden White House is discussing preemptive pardons for those in Trump's crosshairs." According to this article, there is reportedly internal discussions going on inside the White House as to whether or not Joe Biden should use what is left of his mental faculties in the waning days of his presidency to grant preemptive pardons to those people that are or theoretically may be on Trump's radar. According to the article, quote, those who could face exposure include such members of Congress's January 6th committee as Senator-elect Adam Schiff and former GOP Representative Liz Cheney of Wyoming. Trump has previously said Cheney, quote, should go to jail along with the rest of the unselect committee. Also mentioned by Biden's aides for a pardon is Anthony Fauci, the former head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, who became a lightning rod for criticism from the right during the COVID-19 pandemic. All of this is being discussed in the context of Trump's retribution tour, where he is going to lay waste to his political opponents. The idea put succinctly by Democratic Representative Brendan Boyle, who is quoted in this article, saying, quote, this is no hypothetical threat. The time for cautious restraint is over. We must act with urgency to push back against these threats and prevent Trump from abusing his power. So, Chris, one blanket pardon dating back 11 years to Hunter Biden is crazy enough, but to theoretically just start granting these out like Christmas Day gift cards or something as President Biden is leaving the office to anyone and everyone that might be on Trump's naughty list, that seems kind of crazy. What are your thoughts on this new development?
I've been around long enough to see that whenever a scandal like what happened in the COVID pandemic with Dr. Fauci, or whether we're talking about Lois Lerner back at the IRS during the Obama years, and they were going after Tea Party groups. I've been around long enough to realize that these people never get in trouble. So this really is just kind of, not that big a deal to me. Dr. Fauci, I do think, was lied through his teeth and, was doing all sorts of things that might have been against the law. But to be honest, I mean, this is not that big of a deal to me. I mean, these people, this is years ago. They're out of government. I mean, I don't think it would be politically feasible for Donald Trump to even go on some sort of retribution tour to say, we're going to go after this, this guy for what he did 4, 5, 6 years ago, or for Liz Cheney, excuse me, or even Adam Schiff. I mean, I disagree vehemently with what they did. But I'm just not sure I want to prosecute, them. But then on the other hand, I can also see that these blanket pardons for, preemptive pardons, whatever you want to call them, are an admission of guilt in some way. Because basically, why would Joe Biden even fathom pardoning someone like Anthony Fauci if he didn't have at least something to be concerned about? So,
right.
To me, I understand that these pardons are a big deal. I understand the hypocrisy. Joe Biden lying to the nation for months while he was, still trying to get reelected, saying he wouldn't pardon his son. But really deep down, I thought he would pardon his son. It wouldn't surprise me if he does some blanket pardons, in the waning days of his presidency. But once again, I mean, I don't think that it's something that should be, just like causing people to go into a panic. I think we've got much bigger things to worry about. And also at the same time, I think we've got some things to be very excited about.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, some of them, like even that list that I read, like the Adam Schiff and Liz Cheney, and granted, I don't, know all the details of why they would theoretically be targeted with prosecution. Maybe there's some great examples. The Liz Cheney one, I've heard some rhetoric like, well, he's already threatened to put her in front of a firing squad, which we've already talked about. It's just an absurd lie by the media. But like some of them, like Fauci, Jim, I mean, he feels like he's got some questions to answer and some consequences to pay. What are your thoughts on this story?
Well, at the very least, perjury. I don't know how many times you have to see the exchanges between the great Rand Paul, senator from Kentucky, and Anthony Fauci to realize that he perjured himself, which is a federal crime on multiple occasions. And that's not even getting into the illegality, I should say, of what he did, basically setting it up so that around the law, so that gain of function research is done in a Chinese lab outside of any regulation. And then, putting aside, it's not a crime to call the entire country and of people who actually can see with their own eyes and understand what they're looking at, calling us all conspiracy theories and liars. And that's not against the law, but to me, it would be it'd be an enhancement on his sentencing. So just on the base of perjury, Anthony Fauci should be in big trouble. Maybe there, and then, oh yeah, that's right. He also used his personal email account to evade the prying eyes of us, the public. He is a public servant. He was at the time the highest paid federal government employee of all. And he works for us. See, and so we're supposed to hold our public officials accountable. If they're going to be in public service, they actually have to serve the public, not their own interests, not their own narrow agendas, but to carry out the proper direction of the executive branch. In this case, it would have been, or in that case, back in the day, it would have been Donald Trump. So this whole idea, and people here in the chat are wondering if basically a preemptive pardon has any legal precedent, and they pointing to Gerald Ford, his pardon of Richard Nixon, to put the whole Watergate scandal behind us, so that we, it's funny. Back in the 1970s, we didn't want to be seen. We thought it was important that the American system not be seen as some sort of banana republic, that we do things differently here. And he paid his political price. Richard Nixon pays the price in the eyes of history for what he had done and didn't do in the Watergate scandal. And that's going to be it. We're going to move forward. We don't weaponize our justice system against our political enemies in this country. That's the way we used to run things. And then Donald Trump came down an escalator in 2015, and everything changed. So we had to stop this existential threat to our democracy and all of this other nonsense. The idea now of this is why precedents like this are so bad. The unprecedented blanket pardon for 11 years of your own son now has people openly, like this Politico story that we brought up, people just openly just saying, well, okay, well, if he's going to do it for Hunter, for Fredo, why doesn't he do it for Fauci? And why doesn't he do it for Adam Schiff? Adam Schiff is the biggest liar, and that takes him some doing. He's the biggest liar in Washington and has been for the last decade. He abused his position as the ranking member of the Senate or the House Intelligence Committee to come out day after day, night after night, week after week, and year after year, lying about what the intelligence said about so-called Russian collusion between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. Lied openly, repeatedly, and it was leaking information, false information to the press, maybe sprinkled with a little bit of truth. But all of that is also illegal. So Adam Schiff, this tells you how corrupt and stupid California is. He's now going to be he's going to be a senator for the state of California for the next 6 years. I guess unless he gets impeached or charged with crimes and arrested and put in jail. Wouldn't that be something? But this whole idea of this is so destructive. From the people that have spent the last several years wailing about threats to our democracy. I can't think of anything more dangerous to our democracy in the United States than giving blanket pardons to a whole host of people who have evidence all around them of committing federal crimes. That is how you destroy a democracy. That's how you destroy trust in the system. And it's just being floated like it's no big deal because Joe did it for his son. Why not?
Donnie, can I just chime in real quick?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I mean, Jim brings up some very, very valid points, and I do understand that there's a temptation to want to prosecute Fauci and Adam Schiff and some others because they lied through their teeth about the Russia disinformation stuff and COVID, and Fauci lied about masks and about the origin, and like Jim was talking about the gain of function research. So I'm divided on this. There's a part of me that wants to see them actually be prosecuted because that might be a deterrent effect to prevent this from happening in future administrations. But then there's the other side of me that says, wait a second, when Donald Trump comes in office on January 20th, 2025, he's going to have a ton on his plate. And Kash Patel, who we're going to talk about in a second, who's hopefully going to be the FBI director, is also going to have a ton on his plate. And there's only so much political capital that there is to go around. So if Donald Trump, or I mean, technically the FBI should not ask him, hey, do you want us to go prosecute this? But if Kash Patel did go and prosecute these people, I feel like that would really hinder the Republican, agenda for the next couple of years. And I mean, I'm making sort of a utilitarian calculation here and just saying, hey, maybe it's just better to let that rest and just turn the page and just move forward. But I absolutely understand the argument against that, to say no, because these people, people like him, Lois Lerner being a prime example, have gotten away with this stuff for decade after decade after decade. And the only way to stop it is to make an example of people who abuse their power. And Dr. Fauci absolutely abused his power. So I can understand, I can see it, but I just do think that you need to weigh the political ramifications of doing that, because they're going to be, I think, immense.
Yep, it is good points being made. Oh, look at that! Your number one fan just said, "Interesting point, Chris." But yep, let's move on, because this actually kind of ties into our next topic, which is a continuation of last episode's topic that we dedicated most of the show to, and that was Trump making his picks to fill out his cabinet. So, we talked about in the previous, not last week, but the week prior to that, we covered a lot of ground on that. Some picks were better than others. Some picks were more controversial than others. Like I said, we talked a lot about all of the various picks. And I think just prior to the episode going up, we had found out that Matt Gaetz was pulling his name out of consideration for Attorney General. And then we found out shortly after the episode ended that Florida AG, or former Florida AG, Pam Bondi, was nominated in Gaetz's absence. We've also, in the past couple of weeks, seen Dr. Oz was picked to head Medicare and Medicaid. Scott Bessant was nominated as Treasury Secretary. And Heartland friend, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, was named NIH Director. So, like with the picks that we discussed in previous weeks, some of these were met with various levels of outrage. But the one that I think has drawn the most ire from the left was Trump's pick to lead the FBI, and that is Kash Patel. It's already been brought up a couple of times in this conversation already. But first, I mean, Jim, is that fair to say that he's probably drawn the most controversy from the left as soon as his name was thrown out there for FBI director?
Well, him and Pete Hegseth for Department of Defense, yeah, they're taking all the fires. Actually, Donald Trump is actually pretty smart about this stuff, I think, because if all the fire is going to be at Pete Hegseth and Kash Patel, that means that Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. probably have a much easier time getting through. Not to mention the other uncontroversial picks to get through. So, but yeah, I mean, I think as I said earlier, the scuttle was that Kash Patel, there was no way that the Senate was going to confirm him to be director of the FBI. But the last 48 hours or so, I see a lot of scuttle that he is 100% going to get through, that this is the most important pick. Trump is going to, that's another thing, is Trump hasn't even really started overtly leaning on any of these people to make sure that he gets his desired picks for all of these key positions. And once he starts doing that, a lot of this is going to change. And I just want to say one more thing. Trump isn't even president yet. He's already having his first 100 days. Look how much he's already doing, and he's not even president. There's still 40 some days to go until he's inaugurated. And look at all the stuff that's already happening. It's pretty amazing.
Small, just real quick, small detail here. I'm almost positive the FBI director is not at a cabinet level position. So just throwing that out there.
It's not cabinet level, but it is. They have to get Senate approval.
Of course. But why I bring that up is because the current director, Chris Wray, is in the midst of a 10-year term. So, I mean, I understand that Donald Trump is going to fire him.
Yeah.
But I've been watching, some reports that says it's not as easy as that may be. That's why Donald Trump is hoping he'll resign, because that would just make the entire endeavor far easier to do. Donald Trump did fire James Comey, if you remember, very early on when he became president in 2017. So we could see a repeat of that. But just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, well, I also have to make clear that this was a metaphorical this, okay? We just gotta make that very clear. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I've seen more official statements condemning this particular pick. I've seen a couple notable, strong, and immediate rejections of Cash. But one of those was from John Bolton, so I take that as a good sign.
Yeah, but
go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just going to say, all that matters is the Republican senators here. Keep
Sure.
that in mind. And, there's going to be 53 Republican senators come 2025, January 3rd, 2025. And as the reporting goes as of now, these Republican senators, all 53 of them are okay with Kash Patel. There is talk that maybe 6 to 10 of them are not okay with Pete Hegseth, but Pete Hegseth is on a mission to make sure that he can change their minds. And according to him, and I watched a really good interview with him on Megyn Kelly a day or so ago, where he said, this is all being so blown out of proportion. This is just not true. And this is a classic case of just the media trying to, slam him with as much innuendo and as many really lies as can be. So I don't think that Kash Patel is going to have any trouble. Obviously, the blowhards in the media like John Bolton, but John Bolton doesn't matter anymore. Are you kidding me? Who cares what he thinks? Yeah, I mean, seriously, he's a joke. Nobody cares what he thinks.
No, I agree.
I also think it's interesting that not the original person who was floated, but Mike Rogers, who was running for Senate in Michigan, tried to almost nominate himself to be the FBI director. Andrew McCabe, who is a piece of garbage, who was thrown out of the FBI for so many, reasons, was on CNN and immediately said, Mike Rogers would be a really good guy. Guess what? Trump, I guess, apparently saw that interview and said, okay, he's out and Kash Patel's in. And as soon as Kash Patel's name was started to be floated, Andrew McCabe, because he is a frequent contributor on CNN, and hey, my job is to watch this stuff, on a daily basis. He was apoplectic about Kash Patel. So that to me is such a good sign. When Andrew McCabe is scared out of his mind that Kash Patel is going to come in here and really make some changes that need to be made at the FBI, that is a really good sign. So yeah. I'm excited that Kash Patel looks like he's going to have no problem being confirmed as the next director of the FBI.
Jim, I feel like a little bit of a putting the cart before the horse thing, because I'm like other than these contextual things that I'm kind of picking up in this conversation and, articles like the Federalist one that I have in the show notes where it says media meltdown over Trump's FBI picks proves that Kash Patel is the perfect man for the job. Like that's like basically my read on the guy. I really don't know the details or anything. So can you fill me in a little bit more on just like who he is and why he's like good for this position?
Well, why don't we play a clip that we grabbed for this podcast and let Kash Patel make the case for himself why he is needed to be the head of the FBI.
All right, is that which you got? You got that one, Andy? Is that the Go Be Cops one, Jim?
Go Be Cops.
Yeah, his footprint has gotten so freaking big. And the biggest problem the FBI has come out of its intel shops. I'd break that component out of it. I'd shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one and reopening the next day as a museum of the deep state. And I'd take the 7,000 employees that work in that building and send them across America to chase down criminals. Go be cops. You're cops. Go be cops. Go chase down murderers and drug dealers and violent offenders. What do you need 7,000 people there for? Same thing with DOJ. What are all these people doing here? Looking for their next government promotion, looking for their next fancy government title, looking for their parachute out of government. So while you're bringing in the right people, you also have to shrink government.
100% correct. And that's the thing that and I think the American people are going to let these incoming Republican senators and the incumbents who won know that this is a different time we're living in right now. We have had to endure we've had to suffer through some very, very deep corruption in the Department of Justice and in the FBI. It's been weaponized and sicked upon innocent Americans to ruin their lives. The abuse of power is almost too much to even comprehend how bad it is. These senators need to understand that it is vital to protect the liberty of every American to send Kash Patel to the FBI to clean it out. We cannot have, not just in that position, but in so many positions. The time of having somebody with experience, an old Washington hand who just happens to have an R next to his name to take the lead of these organizations, Those times are over. Basically the deep state has declared war upon the American people, in all but firearms. It has been weaponized to the point of, like I said, people's lives have been ruined. And now we have a president who is thinking about blanket pardons with yet even more abuse of the American people and the trust that we should have in our government. And there is no other way to restore the necessary trust that Americans should have in their institutions, especially those like the FBI, which is an extremely powerful organization, like the entire Department of Justice, which is an extremely powerful organization, like HHS, like the Department of Homeland Security. These agencies have enormous power over the American people, and the American people have no reason to trust that they are working for our interests and not their own or some other that we can't even comprehend. These agencies need to be completely upended, and it's going to be messy, and there will be mistakes, and everything's not going to be perfect, but the status quo cannot continue anymore. And if Kash Patel can be, basically at the vanguard of reforming the FBI, I'm sure he was only being facetious when he says he's going to turn the J. Edgar Hoover building into a museum of the deep state on day 2. And on day 1, he's going to tell all 7,000 people in the building to get the hell out of there and go chase cops. But it's that mentality. That's what the FBI is supposed to do. They were the Untouchables. Watch the Untouchables movie. They're supposed to be out there protecting American people and American society by rooting out corruption and criminal activity on a federal level. And instead, we have an FBI that is itself a corrupt organization. And so it takes somebody from the outside, and Kash Patel has a long history of working in the intelligence community to go into the FBI, reform it, clean it out. If that doesn't happen, then nothing is really going to change. And the American people voted very strongly for change.
Donnie,
Yeah, go ahead, Chris. No, I want to go to the next topic pretty quickly, so make it quick.
Yeah, I just want to add in just one quick point here. I think most of the rank and file workers at the FBI are probably good people who want to go and do their job. But the leadership in recent years, Andrew McCabe being a great example, or James Comey being a great example, have politicized the FBI, and that we need to stop. We need to make the FBI back into what it was supposed to be, which is supposed to be completely nonpartisan and supposed to actually go after, common criminals who are in here in the United States, committing crimes that, we need to make sure that this ends. Having the FBI go after, school board parents and stuff like that, this is just ridiculous. I mean, come on. It really is.
I got real quick question before we go to the next topic for you, Chris. So like the Senate confirmations of all of these different picks, that starts like after January 20th.
I'm not sure on that. Congress does convene January 3rd, so there is a 2-week period. I'm not 1,000% sure, but they might, if memory serves correct, they can start the process. Remember, it takes days, if not weeks.
Sure.
And also, I know this is probably a topic for a whole different show, but recess appointments might happen. And Mark Levin has made a very, very good argument in favor of Donald Trump using the recess appointment clause, which has been used by presidents going all the way back to FDR.
All right. Well, let's. I'm sure this is going to be a topic that we're going to continue on, and all of that, especially as we get into the next year and all the cabinet positions and all that actually get confirmed and blah 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 blah. But we got time to move on to our next topic here. So let's talk about a new report, Socialism Watch 2024. So Socialism Watch is a post-election analysis that we started back in 2018, which seeks to show just how well socialist candidates have fared in each election cycle. So we've done this report now in 2018, 2020, 2022, and now we have our 2024 edition. What we do is look at all the candidates in federal, state, and even some local elections that have been explicitly endorsed by one or more of the 3 largest socialist organizations in the United States: the Democratic Socialists of America, Our Revolution, and the Progressive Democrats of America. So in this year's report, we found that these 3 organizations only endorsed 51 candidates across 22 states and Washington, D.C. And of these 51 candidates, all but 3 won their respective races. Among the candidates endorsed by these three socialist groups, 27 ran for the House of Representatives, 2 ran for the U.S. Senate, 12 ran for statewide offices, and 10 ran for local offices. These races occurred in 22 states in the District of Columbia. California was the leading state for socialist candidates in the 2024 election with 10 in total. The last thing I want to mention before I turn the conversation over to Chris is that the number of candidates endorsed by one of these three socialist outfits has declined significantly since 2020. So back in 2020, these organizations combined endorsed 266 candidates. This dropped substantially in 2022 when they only endorsed 132 candidates. And as I mentioned, only 51 were endorsed this year. We can speculate as to why soon. But Chris, anything I missed in my introduction to this report and your initial thoughts on said report?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was a great summary of the report, but I think that it needs a little bit of context here. So 2020, yes, was a high watermark, but first of all, that was a general election. 2022 was a midterm election, so you probably aren't going to see as many candidates. But the biggest thing that, I realized, and when I was, doing the research on this, was the Democratic Socialists of America, who are by far the leading socialist organization in this country, decided this year, for reasons that we can speculate on, and I've got my guesses, to not endorse candidates at the national level, but they farmed it out to their statewide and their local chapters. Now, I went to many of these websites. Some are statewide, some are local. Some are just like, the Democratic Socialists of Chicago, some Democratic Socialists of Detroit, whatever. California, I think, had a statewide website. They made endorsements, but for us to keep this consistent, because we've only done the big three that you said, Our Revolution, PDA, and DSA, the endorsements that they made at the national level. So for whatever reason, and once again, I've got some guesses here, they decided not to shine a national bright spotlight on their endorsements for the 2024 election. But that does not mean that the total number of socialists running in the 2024 election was less than it was in years past.
Yeah, my initial thought of it, because, when you see the percentage, right, it's like out of the 51 candidates, 48 made it through that got elected. It's like a 94% success rate, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, wow, like socialists did great this year. I thought there was a red wave. I thought this was like like a massive Trump victory and all of that. And to see that they have like a 94% success rate almost seems like socialists had a great year this way. But when you put it into the context of these past election cycles, it kind of makes it seem like maybe they didn't do as good as we thought. What do you think?
I disagree with that assessment, because first of all, in 2024, and this has been happening for several election cycles, seats that are safe, Democrat or safe Republican, are very are the vast majority of them. One way of putting it. So the days of seats swinging back and forth in Congress, or even at the local or statewide level, whether it's a governor, whether it's a lieutenant governor, whatever, because we have all sorts of positions that are elected offices here. The days of those just constantly swapping back and forth are long gone. So to me, it's, I think, a much better exercise to say, well, within those deep blue seats, or whatever you want to go, political offices, for lack of a better word, who's gaining ground? Are the establishment Democrats gaining ground, or are the socialist Democrats gaining ground? And I think I can make a pretty good argument, a pretty compelling argument, that the socialist wing of the Democrat Party is on the up and up, and the establishment is on the decline. And that's why I've written some articles about this. I think it's sort of akin to what happened in 2015 when Donald Trump entered the political arena and really rattled the GOP, because for decades, and I've been following politics for a very long time now, the GOP was seen, they're the country club guys, they're the big corporation guys. Donald Trump flipped that on its head and said, no, actually, we're for the working class. No, actually, we're for the forgotten Americans who want to have a job and want to go to a factory and work and not be on the dole. The Democrats now have actually taken up the mantle that the GOP used to have, which is, we're for the big corporations. we don't really care about hardworking Americans. Yeah, we'll always give, free handouts to the, to the poorest of Americans who are going to vote for us no matter what. But that change, that political realignment, I think is very striking. And I think that it took 8 years. It took from 2016 to 2024 for the GOP to really finally embrace. And I mean, I'm sure that many GOP senators and congressmen are not full-throated for this, populist MAGA agenda, but they are on board finally. I think the Democrats now are going to have to go through their own version of this. And we saw this with 2016. Bernie could have been the candidate. 2020, Bernie could have been the candidate. But the Democrat Party used levers that they had at their disposal to prevent that from happening. And we see AOC being very popular. We saw split tickets all across New York City in AOC's district where they said, yeah, we want Trump and we want AOC. So I think that the Democrat Party is in the midst of what the GOP went through for 8 long years. And if it were up to, if you said, Chris, you got to guess who's going to emerge as victorious in this. I think the socialists are going to emerge victorious in this.
Okay. All right. Well, this ties in well to kind of the last section that I want to get into, which is this potential resurgence of democratic socialism. So in the office, amongst ourselves, we have this conversation of just kind of speculating kind of where the Democrats are going to go from here. And there was a case that was made, I think originally by Justin, that he thinks that we're going to be seeing a resurgence of so-called democratic socialism. So the argument goes, and Chris, if I'm misrepresenting Justin, feel free to chime in. But it basically goes that the left is going to have to make an appeal to the middle America. Trump and MAGA were able to tap into some core populist and anti-establishment sentiments during this election in particular, but just generally speaking over the last 8 and 12 years, whatever. 8 years. The Dems are going to need to tap into the same sort of rhetoric if they're going to hope to regain any of the demographic advantages that they have recently lost. And the easiest way to do this, kickstart the Bernie Sanders model, calling out the rich, promising more government, generally an anti-establishment thing, promise more programs and handouts, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this is a perfectly logical response. And Chris, it seems based on your comments in the last section, you agree with this.
Oh, I absolutely agree with this. I think that the heart and soul of the American people is up for grabs. But see, I'm a little more optimistic than some of the people on the far left who think, well, because I think it's so cynical to think, well, if we just offer them more free stuff, then they'll keep voting for us. I think that most Americans are hardworking people with dignity who want to be able to provide for their family and they want to achieve the American dream. Socialism is not the means by which they can achieve the American dream. We've seen socialism never works. It never has and never will. It's immoral. It's founded on immoral grounds. And the populist wave, this MAGA wave. I mean, I'm just in awe as to how much it is resonating with different swaths of the American people, whether it's, Black people in Detroit or whether it's, Hispanic people down near the border who say, wait a second, that makes sense. It makes sense that we should have a small government that doesn't really do all these things that it doesn't need to be doing. They should actually have a border. We shouldn't be starting new wars. We should probably limit our spending and make our government a little more efficient. And we should keep our taxes low. I think that is a profoundly powerful message that if properly articulated and backed up, this is key, backed up by laws passed by the, GOP and rules and regulations that are gotten rid of by, Trump's executive branch, that we could see a rejuvenation of America that's going to make, the 1980s look like nothing. I strongly believe that. So yeah, I think that the Democrats are in a very perilous position because if they stick with the status quo, they know that that's a losing proposition. They know that coalition that they cobbled together, since FDR, they don't have that anymore. That is gone. That is, yesterday's news. So are they going to try to cobble together a new coalition based on, well, if you vote for us, we'll give you more free stuff? I don't think that's going to work, but I could be wrong.
So you
I-
think that they will pursue the strategy of kind of going the more Bernie Sanders,
Oh,
Democratic
absolutely.
Socialist route,
Yes.
but you don't think it'll be successful?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
Jim.
I agree with that actually 100%, because if
Okay.
you look at, everybody knows that Kamala Harris was actually, if she wasn't on our chart and on our thing, but she's a socialist. She's a hard leftist, but they tried to run a campaign in which they hid all that information and tried to
Yep.
put her, push her over as a centrist. They did the same thing with Joe Biden, actually, and then let the hard leftists all over the administration just implement all of this radical policy that ended up costing, ultimately Kamala Harris the presidential election. And so if you're a Democrat right now, you're thinking, well, we tried to fool the country and by that we're moderates, and that didn't work. And that's actually not even what we stand for. So let's go out there and run as socialists. Let's all be Bernie Sanders now. It's really funny. After all these years, after all the ways the Democratic Party screwed Bernie Sanders over by rigging the primary so that he couldn't win in 2016, and then doing it again when he tried to get it in 2020. Now it's Bernie Sanders party now. It's just a matter of messaging at this point.
See,
so it's pretty funny.
I like I said, I get it. I think it's perfectly logical. In fact, I'm curious. Everyone listening in, type in a comment. Let me know if you think that the left is going to swing more toward the populist route, or if you think otherwise. Because I think personally that it makes total sense. I think that if it was just like logic that was making the decisions, at the top echelons of the Democratic Party, that it's certainly what they would do. But I'm not convinced that they're going to do what's smart. I think that their rejection of Bernie Sanders in 2 straight elections is proof of that. And I think, and I don't think I've mentioned this on camera before, but I know that I've mentioned it to some of you off camera. But there was I make a habit out of watching every election cycle, basically. The meltdown of the Young Turks in 2016 when Donald Trump won the presidency, and they started off so smug, and then by the end of it, the writing was on the wall. And the host of the show, Cenk Uygur, whatever you want to pronounce his name, he starts tearing into the Democratic Party and basically saying that the reason why they rejected Bernie Sanders and the populism route is because they're just trying to protect their little all of their friends and all their positions of power. And if the party did swing to the left, they would all be traded out for people that actually believe this sort of stuff. So he was basically saying that the decision to prop up Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, if you want to go 4 years later, wasn't because it was for the good of the party or for any reasons of better electability or anything like that. It was basically just to kind of keep those people in their current positions of power. And I wonder if that's too hard of a hurdle to get across, even if it's the right strategic approach. So that's where I'm coming at. Maybe we will see a fight over the party, but I wonder, well, you know what, Chris, your response to my thoughts on this.
Yeah,
And I have one follow-up question after that.
So I think that the biggest reason that Bernie was prevented from becoming the nominee in 2016 and 2020 was because the Democrats are totally in bed with big banks and big corporations, and big banks and big corporations do not like the socialist agenda whatsoever. They love this hybrid Democrat Party that's that's all about granting favors and all these subsidies to the corporations. Bernie doesn't want to do that. So, that to them is just like anathema. They cannot let that happen. So that to me is one of the big things that are, what made Donald Trump so unique in many ways is that he didn't have any political favors, or he didn't have to worry about donors or any of that stuff. He was just like a political force in and of itself. So yeah, I don't know if the Democrat Party, because look at what happened in the 2024 election. They raised $2.5 billion to Donald Trump's like $500 million. So maybe they're starting to realize that all that money and all the the big banks and big corporations and these celebrity endorsements don't mean anything anymore. So I don't know. It's like there's so many things happening. And Donnie, also, not to go on a whole tangent here, but with the new technology that's coming on board, whether it's AI, quantum computing, and all this stuff, that's going to have huge ripple effects in the U.S. economy. So it could also be in 10, 20 years right now that we're going to say, well, the UBI that the Democrat Party is, universal basic income is, is nirvana for the people because they don't even have jobs anymore. So, I mean,
Sure, right.
like that
Yeah.
could happen. Like, I don't know, but
Yeah, there's no doubt.
But I think right now,
Speculating
right, of course, yeah. So, long-term speculations, kind of pointless. But I think as of right now, with what I've seen from the reaction from the political pundits and from ordinary Americans, they're not they still want America to be the way it was, and as it was intended to be. And that's really, I think, at the core of all this is what Donald Trump is trying to do. He's trying to return us back to some of these norms. He's not a fascist. He's not a dictator. He's not trying to increase government. He's trying to decrease government. He's trying to give more individual liberty and freedom to people to make their own choices, which to me is, what it's all about.
One thing before Jim jumps in, Catherine Burke says, "Why is populism a dirty word?" It is not a dirty word. We've done a podcast not that long ago that was centered around a debate about populism versus elitism, which I think for the most part we defended the populism side, but it's also not necessarily a positive word. It just depends on what person's in charge and what populist agenda points that they're pursuing. But Jim, let's say
I have a quick question for Catherine Burke. Why does she take such umbrage with my holding a pen and kind of using it sometimes?
Stop it, you engineer nerd.
Excuse me.
Wait. So if the left does go like the populist Bernie Sanders route and the right stays kind of the MAGA, hub or whatever, where all the establishment people go, Jim? Where's Liz Cheney go?
They go to the Republican Party. We talked about this in the kitchen at the office. I think it was Monday or Tuesday, Donnie. You, me, and Jack McFerrin, who also was in our Emerging Issues Center. And, I'm 54 years old. I'm old enough to remember very well the 1992 election where, a little tiny little gnome-sized Texan named Ross Perot, out there talking about NAFTA and the deficit and all that stuff. He caught fire, and he was he was a bit nutty and his polls went up and down. But there was this idea, he started the Reform Party, and there was this idea, well, why don't we have a third party? How come a third party candidate how come a third party candidate can never get any traction in American presidential elections? And I think you can make the argument that we've already had a successful third party candidate, and he's won election to the presidency twice, and that's Donald Trump. It's the MAGA party now. So your Liz Cheneys are going to go with the Democrats, the establishment Democrats. The Democrat Party is going to be split basically into the socialists, and then you're going to have the old neocon Republicans and some of those hangers-on of the old way the Democratic Party used to be. That's going to be over there. And what used to be called the Republican Party, well, I guess will still be called the Republican Party, is actually now the MAGA Party. Everything on the Republican Party's agenda is all MAGA. It's all, and basically this is the ultimate of the ground up agenda. The MAGA agenda is endorsed by the American people. A lot of it came from the American people. Yes, Donald Trump was the vessel of that. He takes credit for MAGA. He made terrific hats. He invented the phrase, but all of those policies are things that the American people have wanted across the political spectrum. People that were Democrats their whole life are now voting MAGA. They may have an R next to their name, or they may just be independents, but to them, it's the MAGA party. And so that we've had our third party victory twice with Donald Trump, and we'll
3
call
times
it the
actually.
party, but that's it. Yeah, 3. Yeah. This channel's already demonetized. What the hell? Yeah, 3 times. So yeah, and so I think it's wonderful because it has been a third party resurgence. The Republican Party, if you don't want to take that analogy, but the Republican Party itself and its agenda has been completely transformed. This is not Ronald Reagan's party anymore. It is not anywhere near George W. Bush's party anymore. It's Donald Trump's party. And really, it's America's party, which I think, the majority of America's party, which I think is a good thing. And as Chris said, we want to restore those norms. We want to, one of the slogans of Kamala Harris was, "We're not going back." Well, yes, we are. And the American people want to go back to normalcy, to economic growth, to not having, agency of the government weaponized against innocent Americans, against not being scolded and locked down and all the other stuff that we've had to endure for the last decade. We are going back to when it was normal and people were happy again.
I just wonder if there's going to be like like the line separating the two major parties, whatever you want to label them, will just become establishment versus populism. And that's how it will do. We won't have two parties that are trying to be more populist than the other. What if it was just like, we've already seen like a weird coalition surrounding, Trump and MAGA, right? You got RFK Jr., who like 10 years ago wanted Jim in jail for saying stuff about climate change. Now he's
right.
going to be like theoretically in charge of the Health and Human Services. You've got Tulsi Gabbard, who ran as a Democrat, 4 years ago, and she's going to be in charge of defense or something.
Homeland Security. And none of them are welcome in their party anymore. None of them would be welcome by the Democrats today, or actually probably forever.
Of course not. But then that Cenk Uyghur guy, who's the Young Turks, he's like the biggest like socialist guy out there. Like even he has like been getting red pilled a little bit and being like, Elon Musk responded to my tweets talking about potential cuts we can make to like the Pentagon and all of that. Like I've never had anyone of the Democratic Party reach out to me for like my ideas or anything like that. They got the article right here, The Hill. Cenk signals optimism after Trump win. MAGA is not my mortal enemy. And I just wonder if like there could be this massive coalition where he is even on board. Maybe he's haunting some wing of the Department of Government Efficiency or something like that. And then maybe bring Bernie Sanders on and let him kind of level some charges against some big establishment banks and try to reignite some of that Occupy Wall Street momentum when it comes to all of that stuff. Come on, people. We can have peace on earth.
No, it's funny. It's funny that you bring that up because Bernie has said that he's on board with Doge in terms of the Defense Department cuts. And there have been, John Fetterman said that he's interested in joining the Doge caucus. And there are a couple other Democrats in the House who said that they've already on board with the Doge caucus. So this I think crosses party lines. Everyone knows that the federal government has grown way, way too big, bloated, and inefficient. In the past century or so. Right. It's time to downsize it. It's time to add technology. It's time to make sure that the federal government is not, wasting taxpayer dollars. This year the federal government spent $7 trillion and still has a deficit of nearly $2 trillion. Our national debt is $36 trillion, and we need to do something about this. So I think that this is just another thing that, man, I can't tell you how many times I've been told, whether it was Obama or George W. Bush, whomever, saying, we're going to go in there, we're going to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. It never happens. I'm very excited. I think this is different. This is unlike anything I've ever seen before. And I think that they're going to make substantial cuts and really reorient the direction of the federal government for, our lifetime at least.
Yeah, it's easy to be pessimistic. It's a little bit more difficult to be optimistic. I choose optimism. So
Yes.
Especially with holiday season approaching and all of that, I choose optimism, everybody.
And I'm the biggest pessimist on this podcast, and even I'm getting optimistic about this. And what is, I think, hilarious is that of all the people in the world, it took Donald Trump to put forth an agenda that has consensus and actually establishes political peace that I didn't think we'd see for a long, long time. When you got leftists and people on the right coming together for a common sense America First agenda, and they're all kind of getting behind it. I never would have thought that was possible. And for Donald Trump to be the person who puts it together is just almost mind blowing.
It's wonderful. It is wonderful. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to this latest episode. Join us every week for a new episode of the In the Tank podcast. If you like our show, please subscribe, write a review for us. If you're listening to the audio-only version of this, you're probably catching it a day later. Join us a day earlier, Thursdays at noon Central Time, where we are live streaming this on Facebook, YouTube, X, Rumble. Join in the conversation. Throw your comments and questions in the chat. Maybe we'll show your comments on the screen. Maybe we'll address your questions on the fly. Also, you can help out the show, not by using super chats because YouTube has demonetized us, but you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate directly to the show. That way YouTube doesn't take a 30% cut. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at InTheTankPod. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for the show, feel free to email us at inthethankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
At J Lakely on X, at Heartland Inst on X, and always visit heartland.org.
Fantastic. Chris Talgo, what do you have to pitch today?
I have to pitch a Heartland Institute pen, excuse me, that I just love the feel of it. It is so great. And I just love just doing this. Because you know why? You know why I'd actually like doing this? Because when I was a kid, I played drums. And I used to love having the drumstick and doing the twirling thing, whether it's a golf club or a pen. I just like to do that. So
the small coincidence. All right. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode, and we will talk to you next week.
He's a lion, dog-faced pony soldier.